My role is really, it begins really at the financing stage. So I'll negotiate our investments. I also do our exits. So if we're selling a company, I'll represent 406 in their interests in that sale. And same if the company's going, if we're lucky enough that the company's going public, I'll also oversee our interest there. And then I do general things like debt, employment stuff. If we bring on an executive in residence, I'll negotiate the legal agreement relating to that. If we have a litigation matter, I'll be representing us, not as the litigator, but overseeing that. So general counsel means general, right? You have wet snowballs being thrown at your head every day, and you kind of roll with it. And so my day-to-day changes up all the time.
Awesome. Would love to hear a bit more about that, Esther. But before we talk about that, I'm curious to hear, for those who don't know a bit about 406, can you tell us a bit about the fund and the fund's investment thesis?
Sure. So as I said, we're early stage, typically Series A, sometimes Series Seed. So we're looking at companies in the technology space, and we do 3 spaces, which is digital health, data security, and data management, SaaS data management. We are going to be your first investor after the angel stage. So let me rephrase that. And then we'll sit on we take about 20%, invest 2 to 5 million, sit on the board, and really act as the founder's cheerleader partner throughout the life cycle of the company.
Great. Can you tell us a bit more perhaps about an investment that the fund or you are particularly proud of?
So there are several. I think that the ones that you're proud of are the ones where you really made a huge difference. And hopefully that's all of them, right? But what I like about 406, and in my particular role at 406, because I will often step in at the early stage and act as a GC for our portfolio companies as well, which is one of my favorite things to do. 406 manages to bring in the expertise to support the entrepreneur founder. And that will mean not just sitting on the board and commenting. It will mean bringing in resources, including the expertise that founder needs to actually run a business, to take that idea and create a company. And I think that we've certainly done that. If you look at companies like Carbon Black or Veracode or Cloud Health, those are instances where the partners actually at some point stepped in as CEO in one instance and turned the companies around. So it's the sweat equity. It's not just the money you put in. It's the ability to partner with the management team and grow the business. I think those are the ones you're really super proud of, to see those succeed.
That's awesome. And I'm sure the companies you've worked with obviously really appreciate and value that, because in certain instances, perhaps that's not the relationship, but the experience with the VC fund. One more thing, Esther, I'm just curious about, I'm sure others are as well. For those who are watching today and find themselves in law school and or practicing at a firm a few years out of law school and are interested in getting into the VC business, either as an investor or as a lawyer within a fund, what would you tell them? What advice would you give them?
Well, my perspective would be, as a lawyer, I guess I could also give you, my opinion on moving into the industry through working at a fund. For me, it was very happenstance. So I graduated in 97. I, initially worked at a big firm as a summer associate in New York and decided I didn't want to do that. And I thought Boston was a good legal market that would, give me opportunity, but also I would work 6 days a week instead of 7. And that was true. So I ended up at a firm that was very focused on technology companies. That was happenstance. And that's the space I've ended up in, and it's a fun space. I was very fortunate in the training that I got at that firm. I spent 6 years at Testa Hurwitz. They trained us as generalists. So that enabled me to step in as a general counsel at these young companies, because I was able to have a general understanding of the business, and my skill set, particularly with licensing, was very applicable to them. So I would advise anyone who's looking to go into the startup world, you have to be able to know a little bit about everything. And especially, you know, in a young company, if you want to work there as a lawyer, you're going to be doing a lot of contracting and technology licensing. So learn that. And by the way, in terms of Series Seed investing, I can speak to 406's perspective. The partners there were operators. They founded companies themselves. So I think that's a huge advantage. So they started out as entrepreneurs, succeeded in that space, and then became investors. And obviously they bring all that expertise to their portfolio companies.
Great. Thank you. Esther, I want to go back and rewind a little bit. Would love to hear a bit more about your journey, which I think is such a fascinating and interesting one, to how you got to where you are today. So looking back, can you tell us a bit about law school? Why NYU Law? And perhaps if you could talk a bit about when you came to law school, did you have a sense at that time about what you'd want to do with your career?
So I had worked prior to going to NYU. I'd worked in financial services, one with the Bank of Scotland and then with Merrill Lynch. And I really enjoyed the big picture pieces of it, how the markets worked, and the regulatory, how they were regulated. The sales part I didn't enjoy at all. So that led me to law school and NYU. I was living in New York. My husband was also at the B school, and, it's a fabulous place to be. I loved the culture, and it was my top choice. So that's why NYU. What I learned there is still invaluable to me. And it's the big picture thinking. And I think that's the mindset you need to bring when you're working, generally as a lawyer, but certainly at a startup. You have to think through, where is that company going? And how can I structure legal to get it there within, obviously, the boundaries of what is ethical and appropriate, right? So, NYU doesn't just teach you the rules, it teaches you how to think and how to be practical. And I can give a big shout out to Helen Scott for that. I don't know if she's still teaching, but she is. I was at a Tech GC group meeting, and we were talking generally about law school, and opposite me was a woman who said, I had the best professor in law school, Helen Scott. And I said, me too. And, she said, well, what's the practical answer? And so I bear that in mind every day.
That's incredible. So you graduate from NYU Law. You mentioned earlier that you had a summer experience that you particularly didn't enjoy. So just talk to us a little bit more about what influenced your decision-making process around where you started your career.
Well, it's not that I didn't enjoy it. It just didn't fit what I wanted at the time. Right. So I guess, how did I end up where I ended up?
Yep.
I was looking for culture and opportunity. And I ended up at a firm that offered me both those things and a lot of training. And it was a very business focused firm. I mean, you would assume they all are, but when you're working with young technology companies, they want you to return that call right away. And they want you to think through, well, gee, what's cost effective? It's not what's the answer, but what's cost effective. I don't even want you to spell check the response to me. I want you to just tell me what I need to do. And that's a very different mindset than when you're Goldman Sachs's, law firm. It's just a different viewpoint. So I think that really prepped me for being a startup lawyer. What's practical, how to drive the business, how to think like an entrepreneur, how to be a partner. I think that's the point. But not a partner in a big firm, a partner to your client.
Yep. Side note, and you may have already seen this, a student in the Jacobson program just commented to us and shared that she has Helen as one of her advisors, and Helen's incredible. So shout out again to Helen Scott. We all absolutely respect and adore her. She's terrific. So Esther, at some point you switched, right, from working at a law firm to going in-house. Talk to us a bit about that, and how did that in-house experience impact and influence your career?
So in-house is a very different animal. So I want to say, like, just as a piece of advice to all the students out there, being at a big firm is hard work, but it's a great training ground. So those 6 years I put in as a slave at a big firm really paid off for me in two ways. One, it's the experience, just the learning, right? And two, all my jobs have come from partners at big firms or relationships with those partners at the big firm. So I left at the dot-com bust when my daughter was born. And it was not a good economy. And we had a childcare incident that I won't scare everyone with, but, we decided that I was going to step off the track for a little bit. And then I got a call about a year later, maybe a little like after that, from a partner who asked me to take a role on as a part-time GC. And I said, I don't want that job. I don't want a job right now. And she said, no, I want you to do this. And that got me back into the market. Then a couple of years later, I got a call from another partner that I had worked hard for, who said, I have a general counsel role for one of my clients, and I think you'd be perfect for it. And that's how I ended up at Telerik, which I will say was probably my favorite job of all time. And that was a venture-backed company based out of Bulgaria. And I built that legal team. I was their first legal hire. And we sold it to Progress Software in 2014. And at that point, I was looking for another GC role. And I met with one of the partners, the founding partners at 406, who said, I don't have a portfolio company that's big enough for a full-time GC, but would you do it for me? And that's how I ended up at 406. So that has been my journey. And a lot of it is, happenstance, but a lot of it is also when you work really hard for people and do a good job, they do for you as well. So.
That's great. And I think some of it has to also do with what you just mentioned as you were sharing that, Esther, which is the relationships that you built and cultivated. And that's something that we've heard from other speakers as well. And so I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit. What did that practically look like in that time where you had to step away and focus on your family? How did you manage and navigate maintaining those networks and those connections in that season?
I mean, it's simple things like going to lunch with people and reaching out and checking in. But also, I truly think that people remember the work you did for them. And I don't mean just to advance the career, but to advance the project. And it kind of goes back to partnering again, right? So when you're either at a firm or at your startup or at your VC firm, you're all trying to pull the cart in one direction, hopefully, for the betterment of the team. And if you're a team player, people remember that. People remember that you're the one at 3 a.m. saying, we're going to get through this, rather than complaining and figuring out ideas as to how to get through it. So I think that benefited me. And, did I build relationships with certain partners? Sure. I will also note that it was the women partners who were particularly supportive and who also reached out to me. And frankly, it was Jocelyn Arel, who is now at Goodwin, who said to me, oh no, you're taking this job. I don't care what you tell me. And thank God she did. It was the best thing for me.
That's great. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about that specifically, and would love to get your perspective, both currently at the VC fund as well as your time both at a firm and then in-house as well around just the challenges around diversity and inclusion. And then you've just highlighted certainly a way in which networks have been supportive and helpful as well. And so maybe we can start at VC since you're currently there, and then happy to hear about your perspectives more broadly as well here, Esther. But specifically in the VC community, can you tell us a bit about what 406 is doing to address the challenges that exist within the VC space, both on the VC side and then certainly on the startup entrepreneur side as well?
Yeah. So a little background on 406. 406 has 3 founding partners. One of them is Maria Serino, who's obviously female, and a very strong presence in the venture community in Boston. So we're fortunate to have Maria, and two of our partners are, including Maria, are female out of the 5. So we hope we walk the walk. It's a diverse group. In terms of the general issue, it baffles me as to why it's even a discussion. The data just bears out that if you are not supportive of diversity, both in your companies at the C level and at the board level, and also as part of your own, venture fund, you're just, from a data point of view, missing out, because diverse companies do better. That's just the truth. So just from a board level, from a fiduciary perspective, you should be looking to build a diverse team. In terms of what 406 is specifically doing, we run a student fellows program, and we're now focused on bringing in diverse candidates. So we're recruiting at traditionally Black colleges now, and we're trying to affirmatively hire diverse candidates in that role to build the ecosystem. Same thing at the board level. We're trying to source for our portfolio companies diverse candidates in order to bring on that perspective, which is so important at the board level and at the C level. So it's actively doing. Is it a problem in the venture community? Absolutely. Especially in the tech space, where I will attest that, I'm on a call and it's me and 5 guys. It's true. And we're hoping to do better.
And yeah, in many ways, I'm glad you shared that 406 in and of itself as a fund is a great example, and then very helpful to hear about what you and the team has been also doing on this front. And we need more of it. We need more funds and investors to hold the community accountable. I want to hear a little bit about the current season, right? I think it bears acknowledging that we find ourselves in an incredibly challenging season in so many different ways. Certainly the pandemic, certainly the racial and social justice issues in our country. So from a business perspective, how are you and your team managing and navigating this current season? And then would also really like to hear a bit about how are some of your portfolio companies. I know one of your focus areas is digital health, as you've mentioned, and now more than ever, a very, very relevant space. So would like to hear a bit about how those companies, either in that category or the other categories, are navigating the current time.
So digital health, I think, is one way that we look at contributing, because there's so many underserved communities. And I will say this is a Latina, the Latino community is completely underserved in that field. So investing in the digital health space and supporting, these companies that are trying to reach out to these communities, I think is a super important way to address the issue and meaningful. How are companies doing? It depends on the space. I'm going to say the obvious. You've got, if you're in the service industry, it's a much harder thing. Our companies in digital health, in data security, and data management SaaS are frankly doing well, because it's the divide we're all seeing, right? But companies that are, you know, boots on the ground providing services, that's a much harder thing. And you try to keep them alive and get them through this phase, and hopefully bring them back when they're able to deliver the services. It's a real challenge, and I feel for people. So that's where we are now. In terms of, and I've thought of law students who are wondering where to take, you know, what to do now. You know, I thought of 2011. I understand that, you know, this is probably a worse situation in many ways, but 2011 was not a great situation with the Great Recession. And that's when I actually was starting to build out my team at Telerik. And I was fortunate enough to hire some extremely talented young lawyers out of law school who probably would have gone to big firms or better paying jobs. And I took them, and they worked so hard for me. And, you know, I hope that I gave back by training them. And I want to give everyone some comfort in that they have done so well for themselves. Both of them are now, or two of them are up for partner at big firms. And a third is, you know, doing extremely well in-house at a very hot company. So I feel like if you take what you can get and learn as much as you can in the role you're given, even though it's not your dream job, you can transition to where you want to be.
Thank you. That's terrific advice, Esther. Thank you so much. You've had to overcome a variety of different challenges throughout your career. You mentioned the dot-com bust a few years after you graduated, and then you just mentioned the Great Recession, and obviously now we've got the current environment. So what lessons have you learned personally and professionally through these challenging professional seasons? And what advice would you want to give generally to our students and alums who are listening?
Do you mean by just how to get through it?
Yeah.
You know, going back to what I just said, take the role you can get and shine with that role. If you can get something, grab it and shine. Continue networking. And even with the roles that you get, look for the mentor who's going to back you up later, and help you transition to the role that you actually wanted. And you look for people who are going to champion you as a person, rather than, how would I phrase this? You know, when you have a boss, you want to make them look good, for sure. That's what you want. But they have to support you in your career. So it's got to be a mutual relationship. That's the mentor you want to find, the one that's going to support you and you support them. And that, if that means that, you know, you move out of that person's team and onto something better, that person should be cheering you on. So that's the mentor you want to find, and find that person right now, and hope that they can help you move on to the next opportunity.
Great.
So, yeah.
Thank you. That's really, really good. A quick announcement to the group as a reminder. Certainly, we want to open it up to questions from all of you, and you can use the Q&A function, which you can find at the bottom of your screens, and type in a question. And then Esther and I will either read and answer those questions, or we'll actually call on you so you can ask the question as well. So just want to remind all of you of that. Esther, before we open it up to the group, I do want to just talk a little bit about, you know, obviously you're here today with me under the umbrella of the Venture Fund. And, you know, lawyers, we believe at NYU Law can do anything with their legal degree, including go into venture capital, either as an investor, as a lawyer like yourself in VC, or as an entrepreneur, and certainly anything and everything in between as well. But what that journey looks like is not linear, and it's not, you know, there isn't a defined pathway. And so for students, again, who may be interested generally in and around this space, are there particular either courses or experiences that you would encourage them to pursue to help them think more about getting more comfortable in this space? And then if one finds themselves as an associate 3-4 years out of law school, and again, are looking to pivot, what specific advice or feedback or suggestions would you give to them?
You know, courses at law school, you know, they're the basics. If you wanted to get into MySpace, certainly IP, very important. Even though I will confess, I didn't take anything. I learned on the fly. And in the technology space as well, Maria, I will share with you, was an English major, as was I. And she headed up a data security company that sold for a fortune and is now a partner at 406 and heads up our data security space. So you can pivot all you like. You don't need to have done a specific thing. But I think that you need to know the basics. You need Helen Scott to teach you your basics in corporations and contract law. You know, but the IP would help. In terms of at a firm, you know, I'm biased. I felt like being a generalist was a huge thing. You know enough about employment law, know enough about M&A, you know, take a company public, all of that's super useful, and learn licensing. Those are the things that have benefited me. Yeah, so, and how to get into a company. If you get in young in a young enough company, not only are you GC, you're COO, and also office cleaner. Like, you take on roles that have nothing to do with law, and then you transition. So yeah, I think that's the opportunity. Get in early. And it's a challenge because oftentimes they think they don't need a GC early, and they do. They don't even know what you do, but they need you. So you go in and you take the additional COO responsibilities. Plus you do the legal work.
That's great, Esther. Thank you. We'll shift to some questions from the group right now. I know Peter has already asked one. Peter, I'll unmute you if you'd want to ask your question so we can talk a bit more about that.
Great. Peter, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks for having me. I'm an attorney, graduate of law school, interested in working in a venture capital role as an investor. I was wondering what advice you have for people who are interested in making that transition.
So just as an investor, so nothing to do with legal. I'm trying to think. So I guess, you know, it's networking. And then, you know, and see who's hiring as an analyst, and then as a principal, and then move up to partner. I think it's just a matter of networking within the community. Where are you located?
So let me bring him back 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in New York.
Yeah, I mean, I would network within the VC, the different industry, you know, venues I mean, we certainly have them in Boston, and start talking to people. And there are plenty of NYU MBAs out there that are in the space as well as law. So start reaching out to them, and, you know, and approach it that way.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
As a follow-up on that, we do get this question quite often. And Peter, I'm not sure if this is your specific experience, but I'm just going to generalize it. Perhaps there's this barrier of one, when they're trying to first break in, of the idea of, hey, you've been a lawyer, and obviously we know as an investor, it's just in and of itself a very challenging space to break into. So maybe just, you know, from like the 406 perspective, let's just talk about that specifically. If one's trying to come in as an analyst at 406, what does that process or pathway look like? How does one get in?
You know, it's a small fund.
Yep.
So it's a very infrequent thing for our fund. I mean, if you were looking at something like Summit, much bigger organization, Sequoia, much bigger organization. But we hire not only for experience, but we also hire for cultural fit. And, you know, probably business school experience, financial experience is helpful or strongly advised. And and also operating company experience. So we've had people come in, not just from other funds, but also from, from companies or portfolio companies even, who from their finance teams. So really it's been finance driven, and operating company experience driven.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the entrepreneur side, if we have somebody listening or watching today and they happen to be in one of the spaces that you invest in, how do they get an intro?
So the best way, I think, is if you're in that space, you find the partner. Well, first of all, and I'm going to tell you the obvious. If you've got an idea, you want to start the better mousetrap you've created, and you're seeking funding, you have to find the right VC who's in that space, who's invested in that space previously, who doesn't have a competitor in that space at the moment, right? So obviously they're not going to fund you if they fund the exact idea for somebody else. If they've just exited that space and you have a whole new take on it, find that partner and get a connection. Start networking your way to that partner, and they'll be interested because they already know it. They're already educated. And if you have a better idea, they're going to be willing to invest in it. So
that's great. Thank you. Again, just as a reminder, if any of you have any questions, you can use the Q&A feature and we'll call on you. Esther, as we're talking about investments, I always like to ask VCs who we speak to if you're comfortable sharing about perhaps an investment that the fund passed on. And as you look back, either your partners or as a fund, you now regret perhaps passing on that. And so just some lessons learned, if there's a specific example that you could talk about, that would be really helpful to hear.
It's not, I don't necessarily see all the business stuff.
Yep.
I can tell you on the legal side what gives me pause,
Mm-hmm.
and what we can get over and what can not get over. What we can get over is, because we go into early stage investments, is legal mess. So usually I can fix that. What we can't get over is an unwillingness to do so. And not work in order to grow the company, kind of thing. So we can't get over that. What have we passed on? I don't know that we've passed on anything. I think, in terms of economics, I think that's a big one. So there's some basic economic terms that VCs are looking for. And if those are not provided for in the initial deal, they're going to walk away. So I think that, even at the term sheet stage, you have to be super clear on what you're providing, how the mechanics will flow economically. If those are memorialized accurately in the investment documents, you're okay. If not, and the VC who has a fiduciary obligation to its investors to invest wisely and appropriately is not getting its economic deal, then the investment won't happen.
The business has to be profitable and the fund has to get a return, right? It seems pretty.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we invested in a profitable business, that'd be huge. But, because obviously it's in the tech space, growth and all that. But yeah, I mean, the investment has to be appropriate, right? But not only that, when you invest, we invest for the long term. And there are certain economic mechanisms that have to be there. It's like super basic ones.
Mm-hmm.
And if your founder is negotiating against those basic terms, well, then you're thinking, well, what's the relationship going to be like long term?
Yeah,
it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So perhaps one more question before we wrap things up here.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly think you've had quite a fascinating and interesting career and a pathway that you've had to wear the hat of, obviously being at a firm, again, working in-house, now GC at a fund. So just curious to hear from you about the decisions that you made while you were at law school, right? And the network that you created as well. I know you and I, when we first connected now a few months back, you had told me that you've had great relationships with your classmates from the class of 1997. So I wanted to give a shout out to the class. You mentioned that you were very involved with LALSA while you were a student. So we'd just love to hear a little bit about, it's obvious and clear that you've been just a great relationship builder, a great relationship cultivator over your career path. But if you could talk a little bit before we wrap things up about the relationships that you built in law school and some of those networks of support, that would be great.
Sure. So I was an active LALSA member, and it was an invaluable organization to me just in terms of even emotional support. And it was also, it gave me a lot of insight into our community. I was admissions chair, so I was lucky enough to be able to participate in the law school admissions process, which by being a 3L reader, I don't know if we still do that, but we did it at the time. And the relationships I built at school, in the law school, I still rely on them today. I called Joe Zaro, shout out to Joe Zaro, the other day to ask him a random question. These are people that you're going to rely on for the rest of your life. Some are partners at big firms, some have left the law altogether, but they're always willing and able to step up and give you life advice as well as legal advice. So it's been wonderful.
That's awesome. Esther, as you know, since you're part of the family, we like to refer to our alumni community as a family, and that's very intentional. And so it's really refreshing to hear about your personal experience and your connections even to this day with your classmates and peers and friends. And a huge thank you to you for spending this time with us today. Really, really appreciate hearing about your experiences and your journey. Also just want to thank the group for attending today as well. And as a friendly reminder, we'll be back on September the 24th for a conversation with Felicity Conrad, who's a graduate of the class of 2013 and founder of Paladin. So Esther, thank you. It's been such a pleasure getting to speak with you this afternoon. And thanks to all for attending today. Take good care.